All right, so the time is right for you. You've been thinking about it for a while. It's time to buy a piece of land, and the reasoning you got behind it isn't really all that important. I mean, you may just want to get away from your neighbors in the city. You might be looking for a little bit of a bug out place. Maybe this is a weekend getaway, or maybe this is just a lifelong retirement dream and you want to have a homestead where you can garden and raise animals and everything else. It doesn't matter, but if you're buying land, the transaction's a little bit different. Now, it has some of the same terms as when you're buying a home, you know, title insurance and surveys and things like that, but the process is different and what you're looking for is different. So in this video, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you through, give you the most important things that you've got to look for, things to remember, things to avoid, and in the end, stay out of trouble and make sure you don't lose yourself a ton of money. First things first on this, and this is even in front of the things that you want to make sure you avoid. The number one thing you have got to do is you need to assemble a team of people that you trust. Now, if you're an engineer or maybe an architect or something like that, you've lived in the country, like you understand it, okay, that's one thing, but not everybody's got that experience to draw on. So you want to be able to talk to people who understand what you're trying to do. Now, I'm a realtor. It could be a realtor in your area. That may be something important. That may be something you want to put on your side, but it's not always necessary. A lot of times looking for land, you might have a builder in the family or somebody who does construction on roads and things like that. They know what to look for. You're going to want to have your financing taken care of ahead of time. We're going to talk about that. So maybe you need to have somebody who can deal with credit and things like that. Now, this is not going to be Wells Fargo and things like that, but again, I'll mention more about that in a second. You are just going to want to have people around you that fill in your blank spots, that can answer questions that you've got as you're going. And I mentioned earlier, realtors, guys, realtors honestly are not always going to be your best source of information, because I can tell you, most of the realtors I know don't know a thing about buying land. One of the people I mentioned that you're going to want to have on your team is somebody to do your financing. Now, that of course goes out the window if you're not worried about financing. If you're looking for owner finance deals, okay, well then you may do better to have an attorney on your team, but you need to have an idea of what's going to happen with financing. If you are going to do owner financing and you need that attorney, okay, those terms are negotiable. You can amortize stuff for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, depending on what the seller has. You may end up with a really good rate. You may end up with a high rate, especially if you end up having to go somebody for a short term, just cash funds. But that's owner financing. That's a little bit different animal. We're going to stick to traditional financing. Okay, your best sources of these are going to be people like credit unions, farm co-ops. Capital Farm Credit here in Texas is one of those, but financing raw land is not going to be as easy just because it's a little more risky in terms of what the bank sees it as. If there's a house on it, that's one thing. The bank can see that, they can appraise it, they can look for what other houses are selling for in the area. That's a little more comfortable. So if you're buying land with an existing house, okay, little easier. You can go, again, potentially with a local lender, credit union or something, but you're not going to have to find somebody who does raw land. If you need somebody that does raw land, be prepared. A lot of times they're gonna say, hey, you've got to bring 20, 30%, maybe 35% down, depending on the economic conditions. You may have to bring more money up front quickly. You're gonna have to be able to prove to them that, hey, this land is worth what I'm paying for it. There's going to be an appraisal and things like that that helps take care of it. But you've got to have a lending team that is experienced in this, not just your brother-in-law that says, hey, I can finance raw land, but he's never done a deal like that before. Go find you a lender that's local, that specializes in raw land. Have conversations with them ahead of time about what you want to do with that land, because if you're going to put a house on it, you're going to end up having to refinance it in a permanent mortgage. So you need to have that set up early with that lender so that you can take the right steps to get to that point. So again, financing options, what are they? Are you going to do owner financing, or are you going to get a little bit more traditional financing with a local lender? Now, after you've got your team and you've got your financing put in place, the next thing you're going to want to do, and by the way, buying land isn't a quick thing. It's not like, hey, I like this house, okay, let's go. Buying land, you've got to do a lot of due diligence up front. So the second thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to walk the land, get out on it, get your boots just like I'm doing out here, walk around and see what there is to see on the land. If it's truly raw land, and you can't see everything if there's trees, make sure you explore in there a little bit and make sure that there's not an old mobile home stuck in the trees. Make sure that there's not a well somewhere that nobody knew was there, things like that. Get out on the land, find the boundary. Google Maps does a really good job of showing you where the boundaries are. If you want to get more specific, find something like Onyx or something like that, but get out on the land and walk it. This is another spot where having that team is really, really good for you, because if you don't know what to look for, let's say, wetlands, for example. Here where I am in Central Texas, there's certain grasses and certain trees that grow really well in wetlands. And I mean, I'm gonna turn around here. Look, I've got a little bit of a wetland down here. So if you don't know what grasses and trees indicate wetlands in your area, you're going to want somebody who can, because just because it's dry does not mean it's a wetland, and just because it's dry doesn't mean it can't flood. So make sure as you're walking that property, you're paying attention to the way the property looks. Is it flat? Does it have a steep drop? Again, you want to be out there, because if it's got a steep drop off and it's going to cost you an extra $100,000 to build a foundation, now all of a sudden that $50,000 piece of land may not look like such a good example. So get out on site, preferably if you're not used to this, get somebody who understands land, what it takes to build, bring a builder out there, somebody in construction, and get a good idea. And it's also always a good idea to visit it multiple times, especially if you can get out there while it's raining or after a huge rain event. Get out and see. Hell, sometimes that land might be 3 feet underwater for most of the year, and it's not really even in the FEMA floodplain. So make sure you get out and walk the land. And before we jump onto that next one, keep in mind when you're walking land, if it is wet, mud boots are a good idea, but if you're walking land, at least put on boots and jeans. Here in Texas, just about everything will poke, bite, or sting you. Same thing in a lot of other states. Make sure you're taking precautions on that. Now, the third thing that you're gonna need to do here, as I'm walking through waist-deep grass, the third thing you're going to want to make sure to do, and we haven't gotten to real estate yet, the third thing is talk to the neighbors. Try to find the neighbors. Again, you're going to go out and visit the land multiple times. See if you see somebody driving down the road when you're going in or out of the gate. You know, drive down, see if you can see a house close to the road. I'm going to tell you from growing up in the country, if you pull up to somebody's house in the country, make sure you stay in your vehicle, honk your horn once, somebody will come out, or they may not come out. And if they don't come out, don't get up and go to the door. Just honk your horn. If they don't come out, don't go bother them. But talking to the neighbors will tell you a lot. As I'm trying to get through here, talking to the neighbors are going to tell you a lot about the land. They may know if it floods. They may know where the low spots are. They may know, hey, Farmer Joe used to have a still out there. I don't know, maybe, especially if you're in the eastern part of the U.S. Or, and I'm getting to a little bit of a stopping point here, you know, there might be an old well out there. There may be electrical on the back that nobody knows about, but the neighbors do, especially if they've been there for a while. It also will tell you potentially, are there any additional restrictions you need to know about? Do the neighbors have a pig farm that, you know, that north wind blows and is going to blow, or a feedlot for cattle? Talk to the neighbors, find out what's going on out there. And if you talk to the neighbors and they're really aggressive and mean, you may not want to buy that land just because of who your neighbors are going to be. So that is a very important part of this. Go talk to the neighbors. Now, I mentioned due diligence, okay? That's really, really big on any type of land purchase, and that's going to be on you. Again, even if you have a realtor involved, those realtors don't always know, or I should say us realtors don't always know anything about due diligence. But some of the other things that you need to do from a due diligence perspective, search on federal websites to see if any part of the land is a designated wetland area or is in a recharge zone for an aquifer, which is common here in Central Texas. Or check on the FEMA website. FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Check on the FEMA website because there's maps and stuff on there. You can enter the address or just zoom in on the map on the property, and you can see if any of that land is a designated flood area. There's different types of flood areas. We've got 25-year floods, 100-year floods, 500-year floods. Those are usually designated, I believe, A, B, and C. And then if it's not in a flood area, it's an X designation, but you can see that on the property. And it doesn't have to be the whole property. It can be, you know, half of the property's in a floodplain and half of it's not, or most of the property is in a floodplain. That's going to be important because even though you can technically build houses in a floodplain, particularly 100-year, 500-year, it may have additional insurance implications. So find out if, you know, the land of your dreams, find out if any of it is a low-lying area like this over here, and make sure it's not in a floodplain, or if it is, make sure you have the ability to build out or to pay for flood insurance. So make sure you are checking on wetlands and the flood areas. See if I can keep cruising on this property without eating it. So I'm going to be looking down for a second. But the next thing, and this is finally getting into some real estate stuff. Once you've decided, hey, this is a plausible property, I'm not worried about wetlands or flood zones. The neighbors are okay. There's no crazy things going on any of the properties around me. Now you're going to want to see, is it actually a deal? Are you paying a good amount for it, or are they asking a decent amount, or what should that price be? So in Texas, this is where a realtor comes in handy, because in Texas, we're a non-disclosure state. We don't have to disclose the cost of sales or the price of sales to anybody. So in Texas, the MLS is where sales are recorded, and that's a system that realtors use. In other states, I know, in California in particular, I know this for sure, I go on Zillow and find out what properties have sold for as long as the realtor put it in there. But start searching comps, comparable sales, to find out, hey, per acre, is this a good deal? Oh, coming down. Is it a good deal per acre? Are there other properties that are, you know, similar size and similar features that have sold for the same price? That's the first real estate, you know, realtor thing that you're going to do after you've already taken all those other steps. So that's the fifth one. Get your comparable sales. Now, the sixth part of this is make sure that you have a new survey. And look, if it's a property that's listed with a current survey, that's fine, and you may have actually found that information out earlier. Especially if you're working with a realtor, they may have put it on the MLS. But if we're talking about large pieces of property, and by large, I'm saying anything that's, you know, call it 10 acres. And by the way, when you're walking property, this is the kind of crap you're going to have to do. When you are dealing with larger piece of properties, I would not buy a new piece of land without a brand new survey, even if the other survey is 2 years old. And the reason I say that is because you never know, especially if you've got something that's on some water or something, you never know when a boundary has shifted, somebody's mismarked a boundary. I used to work for a survey company, and we found survey corners in the wrong spot, you know, the wrong spot all the time because other survey crews just didn't do their job right. So personally, I wouldn't buy a piece of land without a brand new survey. That's completely up to you. You know, surveys can be expensive. You know, here in this area, 10-acre survey, if they've got to walk through stuff like this, a 10-acre survey may cost you a couple $1,000s. That's a small survey. If you're buying 50, 60 acres, holy cow, you know, it can run you $5,000, $10,000 real quick. But again, if you want to make sure where your boundaries are, you want to make sure, hey, I can put a road here. This is not on the neighbors. I would hate to spend $50,000 cutting in a road and then find out you put it in the wrong spot and it's on the neighbor's property. So make sure you get a survey when you're buying a piece of property. Next thing that we're going to do, number 7, is we're going to talk about utilities. And I could have put this earlier, but again, this is part of that due diligence phase because you're not always going to be able to get this information from the very beginning. So the number 7 thing is figure out what's going on with utilities. Now, this also cuts in with the last one with a survey. You want to make sure, you know, if there's any major easements, you want to make sure that you know where those easements are. Easements are usually some type of utility, whether it's electric or water or oil and gas. So you want to make sure that you don't have easements running across your property if you're trying to bring a water line in and you can't cut in a certain area because there's an easement there that brings in a natural gas line. That's kind of important to know. The other thing that you want to know with utilities is who is the electric provider? How much is it going to cost to run that electric line 1,000 feet to your property? The last one I ran was about 400 feet and it ran us $7,000. Again, not cheap. You want to know these costs up front before you start dealing with before you own the property and you start outlaying cash for this and you go, holy crap, I spent this much for the property. Now I got to spend $40,000 on electric and all this other stuff. So understand where your utilities are coming from. Water. Is there a public water source that you can tap into at the road? code? Can you put a well in? Some places you can't put a well in. And how much is an average well? Around here, again, now, $25,000 to $30,000 for a well, because we've got to go 800 feet down to get water. Other places, I mean, Southeast Texas, Louisiana, hell, you may only have to go down about 100 feet or 50 feet to hit good water, but you want to know that ahead of time. Where are you getting that, that water from? The other thing is your septic. Make sure, or do you have, municipal wastewater available? If you're buying rural land, it's probably going to be septic, so you want to know a few things. A, can you put a septic on the property? Does the county typically approve them there? You can call the county and find out. A lot of times you're going to have what they call a perk test or a percolation test. See if you put a septic in, will it actually absorb into the ground? There's some states around the country that have such low water tables that they won't let you put a septic line or septic tank in because it would contaminate groundwater. You're going to want to know that ahead of time. And again, this is typically during the due diligence phase once you're under contract. But if you're looking in one area and you're looking hard, that information may apply to everything. So call that county and find out, hey, how easy is it to get a septic permit? And there's also well information online. You can go online or call the county office and find out the wells around you. They usually have them mapped. Where are they? How deep are they? What do they produce? So the whole point of this one is make sure that your utilities are taken care of. And do you want backup utilities? Okay, do you want a rainwater catchment area? Again, here where I am, my whole house is rainwater, and you can do that, but I know in Colorado, it's really, really hard to get rainwater. So if that's in your mind, are you looking for something that's a little bit more off-grid? Maybe you want to catch water. Is it even allowed by the municipality? Got to check all those things out during your due diligence phase. Okay, for number 8, we're getting a little bit more niche. Now, this is more unique properties. Let's say that you're looking for something that you can plant some crops on. Okay, if you're looking to plant crops, you're not gonna wanna plant them in ground like this, if you can see it, because it's a little bit hard to grow stuff in rocks, okay? So are you gonna need to do soil tests to find out what's there? Again, there are some federal websites that you can search for, and they will give you soil levels or soil layers in that area, and it gives you a pretty good idea, looking down, making sure that wasn't a snake that I saw. It gives you a pretty good idea of what the soils are like in the area. So if you're wanting to grow crops, you're gonna wanna make sure that where you are, you can actually do it. It's not just like a 6-inch layer of topsoil and then solid rock underneath it. So make sure you're checking out your soil quality if that's what you're looking for. Or if you're gonna put animals on it, as you're driving around looking at the area, you can look in other pastures and see, hey, they've got horses. Are there a bunch of them? Or cows or goats? Are there a bunch of them? What does the ground look like? Is there a bunch of grass and they're really not having to worry about it? You may see 30 or 40 head of cattle, and there's plenty of grass. Okay, I feel pretty good about that ground if I'm trying to grow in it. But if you see 3 horses or 10 goats and it's bare with rocks, I might not want to put a farm there unless I want to do a hell of a lot of work hauling in dirt and amending that soil. So that soil quality is an important thing. And I got to back up a little bit here to go a different direction. The other thing that, again, is a little bit more niche is maybe when you're talking to the neighbor, somebody mentioned old Farmer Brown that you're buying it from, or the grandfather had a big diesel tank or something like that on the property, okay? If you see that or know that, you may want to do environmental testing. Or if in your research, you find that maybe there was a landfill nearby. Okay, you may want to do environmental testing during your due diligence period just to ensure that you don't have any kind of toxic metals, heavy metals, or anything else. Again, that's gonna limit what you can do with the property. So 8, make sure you're considering soil quality and environmental quality if you need that property to do something like that, to grow or have cattle on or something like that. All right, almost done here, guys. I appreciate you sticking with me as I'm trudging through this stuff. By the way, butterflies are everywhere right now out here if you see them behind me. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is make sure to check on deed restrictions and also community restrictions. As I'm diving through here, you may not always know that something has deed restrictions, and properties can have deed restrictions even if they're not in an HOA. A lot of people are kind of surprised to find that out. But sellers can impose deed restrictions on a property that they're selling, and you may not know it. In Texas, the people who help us with that are title companies. If you're not in the state of Texas, you may be closing with an attorney or something like that, a fee office. you're going to want them to provide you any deed restrictions. Now, a title search, which we're going to talk about next, usually will tell you everything you need to know about deed restrictions and what deed restrictions are in place. Now, that's just deed restrictions though. That'll tell you about deed restrictions, but community restrictions are a different thing. We've got different restrictions at the county level in terms of what you can do, what you can't do. Some counties will, most counties will allow any type of agriculture, but they may not allow for manufactured homes, or they may dictate that if you put in a manufactured home, you have to do 2 or 3 different things in order to get that approved. So you want to check county restrictions. You also want to check city restrictions. If it's not in a city, that doesn't necessarily mean that the city restrictions don't apply. In some areas, cities have ETJs and things like that, and by their laws in other states, they actually have a reach far outside of their city limits. So you want to check restrictions at all those levels, state, county, and city, and also local deed restrictions or seller-imposed deed restrictions. Make sure you get that taken care of. You're going to get tired of hearing me say this within your due diligence period. You got to get it done before your money goes hard so you don't lose that money if you see something that you don't like. The next thing that you're going to want to make sure that you do is get a title commitment and a title policy on your purchase. What a title policy, it's important to understand what that means. That means it's an insurance policy. Just like you get insurance on your house or your car, whoever you're getting the title from, they're going to offer you title insurance. What that does is it ensures that you have sole right and ownership to that property, and you're not going to have to pay anybody else for anything. You know, let's say the person that you're buying it from before you, maybe they had a road put in, spent $100,000 on a concrete driveway and didn't pay them. Okay, well, they have a certain amount of time to file a mechanics lien against that property, and you want to know about that before you buy it. The title company or your closing lawyer, your fee office, all of those people, as long as it is filed in the county, they should have that mechanics lien ahead of time. They should know that it's there. Insurance policy, the title policy that you're buying is saying, hey, if you as the closing agent, title company, attorney, whoever's closing it in your state, if you as the closing agent screw something up, I'm buying insurance so that if it comes back on me and that concrete company comes and tries to give me a $100,000 bill, no. I was given free and clear title to this property. You go talk to the closing agent. Now the title company or that attorney has to make it right, not you. Never, ever, ever, ever buy property without a title policy in hand, a title insurance policy. So key, guys. Don't ever do that. As I'm climbing my way up out of this dry creek bed, I just want to reiterate to you that I'm giving you these things in a specific order because there's things you can take care of before you go under contract. And like I said, the likelihood of you finding a piece of property and deciding on the spot, this is the property I want, I know everything about the property, let's put in an offer on it, is extremely small. You're going to visit that property over and over. You've got research to do. Heck, I even forgot to mention it a while ago. You want to see if there's current tax exemptions on there. In a state like Texas, an ag exemption or timber exemption or something like that can save you a ton of money. And heck, you may not be able to afford that land if it doesn't have an exemption, but if it does have an exemption, it may make it well within your means because you don't have to pay those taxes. So these are all things that I'm giving to you in a specific order. This is out of a lot of experience dealing with this and helping people through this process. So make sure, if you're looking for raw land, for the love of God, make sure you don't jump into something. I don't want you to lose a bunch of money.